Hello there, everyone. My name is Allie Virtue. I'm a functional medicine nutritionist and the owner of Parkside Nutrition, and your host today for the Pre-Diet Podcast. This podcast is all about teaching you everything you need to know so you don't feel the need to start another random diet on Monday. Instead, you're going to learn real strategies, real tools from real people, hear real conversations that hopefully resonate with you to create a different journey for yourself if that's what you are looking for. And today's guest is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I will probably be listening to this episode myself, even though I was present for the whole conversation, and I don't really like listening to myself or hearing my own voice on these recordings, but there was just so many things to take away that I feel like I need to listen to this again for myself to fully absorb all of the information and strategies. This was just an incredible conversation with none other than Dr. Kristine Medyanik. She is an organizational psychologist, executive leadership strategist, author, and the founder of the Evolving Leader Fellowship, where she helps leaders build healthier organizations by better understanding people. With more than 2 decades of experience in leadership development, higher education, and organizational consulting, she specializes in the human side of leadership: emotional intelligence, motivation, communication, decision-making, psychological safety, conflict resolution, and organizational culture. She is known for translating complex research into practical, immediately applicable tools. Dr. Medyanik has developed a growing library of leadership courses, workshops, and executive development programs that equip leaders to navigate change, build resilient teams, and lead with greater clarity and confidence. Her engaging, interactive style combines evidence-based insights from organizational psychology and neuroscience with real-world leadership experience, leaving audiences inspired and equipped to create lasting impact in their organizations and communities. I know that was a lot, but you are in for a real treat. She is one of the most hilarious people I think I've ever met, and that just combines perfectly with her knowledge that makes it such an engaging experience. Anytime I've seen her speak or a workshop or anything like that, I've learned so much, and it just sticks in your brain because you learn it in such a fun and engaging way. So let's go ahead and dive right into this episode. Welcome to the Pre-Diet Podcast, Dr. K.
Well, hello. How are you today, Allie?
Doing well. How are you?
Really good. Really good. Yep, it's been a good couple of days. I'm excited to talk about this following working with you on a retreat and seeing kind of how that plays out in the world of nutrition.
Absolutely. And that was one of my first questions, is usually with people, because especially if we've actually had an organizational psychologist on the show before, but I find obviously psychology is really related to any behavior change, or I feel like anything you want to do.
hmm
So it might appear random to someone, but once you get into the weeds of like working with anyone with any kind of behavior change, I know my husband in finance sees this a lot too, of like, oh, it's behavior change. Like we're trying to get someone to change their behavior based on what they say that they want. But for someone who isn't familiar with an organizational psychologist, can you explain a little bit of how you work, whether it's individuals, companies, what that might look like?
Yeah, so I own a company called The Evolving Leader, and I like to tell people that it's kind of the squishy side of business, right? It's the not operations side, it's the how do I get the most out of the people around me? How do I get high capital return essentially from, hey, I'm giving you a paycheck. Now, how do I get you to do what I need you to do to support my organization? Um, there's a couple pillars in organizational psychology that I like to point out. One of them is leadership. Culture is a big one. Change management is kind of one of the other pillars. And so, if we're talking about nutrition and behavior change from your lens, both change management and the leadership and or communication within leadership play a pretty big role in how do you serve somebody and how do they receive the information. I've been doing what I do with the Evolving Leader for somewhere around 15 years now. I have about 15 books published and work with organizations of various sizes across the United States.
Amazing. And can you talk a little bit about your 4 ways? Because I know we'll talk about it, and I absolutely love this, and I didn't mean to. Hopefully, it didn't come off across that way at like your mini retreats, but I was just excited to ask so many questions because everything you were saying as far as like emotional intelligence and like touching on those different personality types just resonated so much with clients and working with them, but also just people of like, how can I communicate with people better? So we can start there. And so everybody's kind of familiar when we start talking about the different four ways.
Yeah, so I developed my own personality assessment somewhere around 15 years ago. I was working with a college and they didn't offer me any budget for doing personality assessments. So I've always been really passionate and really loved the DISC assessment and Myers-Briggs, and I've followed a number of other ones over the years. But this class that I got assigned as a faculty, they required the personality assessment or some assessment as part of college success to help students identify where their challenges were going to be at. But they didn't give me any money for students to be able to take those assessments, and none of them were free, or what you got was super limited. And so I said, well, I've been passionate about it. I've done the research around it. I have the field of expertise. Let me start developing my own. And so when I did that, I didn't call it Ways to Lead at first. In fact, I based it on my four favorite characters of The Big Bang Theory. And so that's little known knowledge for a
I know
number of,
that.
yeah, no, it was fun. And then as time sort of evolved and as I went deeper into the research and started to expand my typologies, what I recognized was there might be a copyright issue at some point in time if I went to publish or something like that. And so I modified and really started looking at sort of those core behaviors and thinking, how do I name these? But I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to keep it a way that, like, as a receiver of the information, people could easily go, oh, I see what's happening here, right? I see that core value clearly and easily showing up in the way people are behaving. And so that's about the time, and this was probably just 4 years ago, that I modified and called it Ways to Lead, ways with a Z, because who doesn't like to create spelling challenges to really bother some of our detail oriented people. And then I named my four after the ways. So there is nice way, right way, my way, and fun way. And so each of those typologies have two core components that I teach, no matter who I'm talking to, in terms of their motto for how they operate the world. And that's really important for me as, again, a receiver to remember that lens that people are sort of watching the world through. I think that's really easy to forget when we're busy or tired. It's fast to go, well, I don't know why you didn't read my 19-page email, right? Well, it's because they don't care. That's like, there's a three of the four groups are like, oh, wow, could have bullet pointed that. And so I always look at the motto they operate the world through, and then those core values. And core values become critically important when we talk about emotional intelligence and ego, because when we push up against somebody's core values or poke their core values on accident, ego's going to flare, right? That's the moment that you kind of go, oh, no, you didn't. And it's not always intentional. It's not always like we do it on purpose, but your core values might not be the same as my core values. And so something that I do might ruffle somebody else's feathers, and it's literally just the way that I'm operating or seeing the world. Do you want me to go through the motto and the core values for each one?
That would be great.
Okay, so I will send this to you, Allie, and then you could
Perfect.
potentially send it out to your community. But
Yeah.
I'll start with Right Way. Right Way's motto for operating the world is rules exist for a reason. They are my historians. They're my group that look at process, procedure, and history. That's important to remember because when we're talking to people, this is a group that's going to go really deep into the details of things. And if you're not a details person, if you're not a data history person, you start to go, why are you still talking? Right? And it's again, literally just the way they see the world and feels helpful to them. So, my way is my second personality type that I talk about. They operate with the motto, but can't we do my idea first? They operate and work within core values around knowledge, competence, and efficiency. And so, I like to tell people my way is love rules that they wrote, not so much the rules that the right ways are operating by. And that also is really important to recognize when they see something as inefficient or it doesn't make sense or the rule feels outdated, they're really quickly going to go, I'm not following that rule. It's dumb. And so that core value of efficiency pushes hard up against the right way tendency of, yeah, but it's the rule, or something that you'll hear from them a lot, but that's how we've always done it. Right. And you start to go, oh man, I've been watching that in action. Now, the next one that I talk about, it's Fun Way. I'm married to one of these and I love him dearly. I like to think that in some ways he's keeping me young, but in some ways he's contributing to my gray hairs. And there's some funny stories from when we started dating that I was like, what are you doing? Oh my God. But maybe a podcast for a different day. My fun ways operate by the motto, what's the worst that can happen, right? They're the hold my beer group. And we love them. We love them, right? We love them.
Yeah.
But also they're the group that if they don't have a right way in their life, they'll end up in jail. It's not always it's not on purpose. I mean, it just
Right.
seemed like it would make a good story. And so their core values are around adventure, impact, boldness, and spontaneity. And so you can see how that diagonal, if you look at the chart again, the diagonal between um, right way and fun way is like in direct competition with each other, in direct conflict. And in organizational settings, we don't always mean for it to happen. In our families, we don't mean for it to happen, but the way I communicate can unintentionally ruffle somebody's feathers. And that last one is Nice Way. They are the can't we all just get along group. They operate from core values of compassion, peace, and harmony. And so they're always sort of looking for that opportunity to bring groups together, create equality and connection in groups, which is in direct conflict with my ways of efficiency because my ways see that like community building as terribly inefficient.
Yeah.
And it pushes up against that core value when you're like, why do we have to spend all this time talking about feelings, right? When they're just trying to get things done. And so we actually need all of them. And in group settings and family settings, once we capitalize on the strengths of each of those types, we outperform groups that are more homogenous in personality consistently, almost 4 to 1. But interestingly, in organizations and team settings, we're often drawn to people that think and act like we do. So,
Mhm.
cognitive diversity is a diversity element that we really need to be aware of in our team settings.
And can this be different in work settings versus like personal life? Because I see that disconnect sometimes as well, at least for my lens of like someone is very diligent at work, very responsible, very successful. And in the health sphere, they don't see themselves as very successful. But I'm like, you are a uber disciplined person. You get all these things done. You're very responsible. Is there a way to kind of help people bridge the gap between those two?
Yeah, so it's going to be around helping people recognize which part of those core values is sort of creating resistance for them. So let's say a my way and a right way, highly task oriented, usually very effective in their professional lives. But if we're trying to help them navigate nutrition, right way is going to be looking for proof that the change is going to work and they're going to struggle to say but my friend saw this other thing work and so my another friend saw this other thing work so like there's no rules, right? That's a lot of gray area for a right way. And
Mhm.
so creating rules for them to operate in and parameters for checkpoints of success, right? Because they're gonna be starting to go, it's been 3 days. I don't know what the problem is, right? I did what you said and I don't see any change. And like you said, there would be change. And so I followed your rules and now it's stupid. And,
Yeah.
and you're like, huh, yeah, no, I think
This
I've had
is,
that
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely had that conversation.
And my ways, highly task oriented, they're gonna see the rules, but they're gonna be looking for when it hasn't worked for somebody and go,
Hmm.
no, my friend tried that and it didn't work. And so I'm not even gonna bother. But it's also for them, there's gonna be that efficiency of it's not fast enough. And so I
Hmm.
need to understand how to make it happen faster or more efficiently, be more clear. And so you're going to hit resistance points because they're going to go, it's not working, it's not fast enough. um Now the relationship oriented ones, it's interesting. So that bottom part of the grid, the nice ways and fun ways, are going to be looking for human connection quite frequently, because that's what they're drawn to. And so they may be on some of those calls or connecting with you simply because it's a human connection, but not because they actually are very interested or buying into the changes yet. And so helping them, like a nice way, helping them really clearly start to understand how it benefits the people around them to be healthy, right? That's going to be a key component for them to get that buy-in. Where if you told them my way, let's do this for your friends and your family and the people that love you, they're going to go, yeah, no, that's not how you're going to light my fire, right? And if we're
Hmm.
trying to connect to a fun ways desire for like a more nutrition based lifestyle, we need to connect into the value of adventure, right? How does being healthier help you be more adventurous? How does that help you show up um, for more people around you to have higher impact and to be able to say, yeah, I feel great. Let's do that, right? Like, let's just try something. Hold my beer, right? Or my diet beer in this case. Uh,
That's amazing. That's so helpful because I can definitely see clients that I do think I strive, ironically, because I think it's a little bit opposite of me with is it the fun way, the nice way, at the bottom, because I think that's just my
mhm.
business model as I talk to people versus like I don't do email check-ins, I don't do like some of the probably more time efficient strategies. But those are, I do find sometimes those clients that they do want to talk a lot, which is great, but like having that blend of like happy to talk about things but also yeah trying to like hopefully it leads to action. But that's yeah checking the box of like but we do it, we talked about it a lot and that's great and we figured out a lot of information, but always making sure that that leads to some sort of action that will give them the result that they want. But that's super helpful. One of the things that came to mind, especially because it's not that you want to or I guess that's a question. Can people change their values? Because I, for a little context, I see a lot of people that maybe grew up with not a lot of resources, right? And so like getting the most bang for your buck with food is a big like held value of like I'm gonna finish my plate because this meal was $9 and I'm not gonna waste $1 of it. But now as an adult, they have a little bit more means, and we need to kind of shift that potentially to like, but can we save it for later? How do you have any tips on that of how we maybe evolve or like see those situations slightly differently?
Yeah, so this is one of the things I talk about with all the groups that I navigate any version of professional development. I believe with everything in my being, our personality is something we're born with, right? I believe that it is
Hmm.
sort of a seedling of our personhood and it evolves over time. But I don't think our core personhood changes, right? But our environment and our experiences shape how it shows up. So there's personality based core values that we absolutely see. We see a pattern pretty consistently, but there's core values that come from all kinds of other spaces too, right? The experiences in our lives, like birth order, religion, race, culture stuff, gender
Hmm.
stuff. Um, a generation, right? And so if I have a my way Gen Z versus a my way boomer, those core values, both from generational and personality stuff, mean that that person shows up differently, right? My grandma, my great grandma went through the Great Depression, and I don't know that you could have ever shifted some of her beliefs about like every spoonful of food matters. She used to, you're going to laugh at this. She used to bring like washed out bread bags, like the Wonder Bread and the wheat bread to the buffets that we would go to after church. And she'd be like, all right, kids, go fill up a baggie. And it wasn't even like a Ziploc baggie, it was like a used sandwich bag. And it was like, and I don't think you could have ever shifted that
Yeah.
desire to keep just a little bit of reserves around,
Hmm.
because that experience that she had was so fundamental in who she grew to be,
Hmm.
even decades later. So there's a lot of places that our values
Hmm.
come from, and so rather than fighting against those core values or hoping to change the core value, I think that there is power in working within them, right? And so you, as a coach, then start to shift the way you talk about things to sit within those core values, those behavior expectations that you need, by really narrowing in on what is the value you're actually holding. And if we need the value to change, then we really have to go deep into the, like, how has that value served you over the years? Oh, it hasn't? Huh. Maybe we should talk about that.
Absolutely. I mean, that really helps. Also, I think it reiterates a point, at least for dietary stuff, there's almost no like, I guess for some it is helpful for sure to have rules, so to speak, but like I that's always kept my job interesting. If someone's like, "Don't you dare touch my popcorn after dinner," like that's my favorite thing in the world, and it's like, "Okay, fine." Like that's not very important. So there's usually not one, like critical element that's like, "You must change this." There's nothing else, in your lifestyle that we can change to kind of compensate if this is, your thing. But that's all super, super helpful. When
It's
it comes
interesting to
to
think.
Go ahead.
I
Oh,
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, it's interesting to think about how often, though, somebody's like, don't change this and don't change this and don't change this. And then you go, so what are you willing to change?
Hmm.
Right? Like, what area are you willing to adjust? Because you're here recognizing what you're doing isn't serving you, right? In its
Hmm.
comprehensiveness, something is wrong. And so I can't fix it. I can't download a changed lifestyle for you. Like, you still have to do the work.
Absolutely. And I won't say it's a red flag, but like, it's something that I'm kind of wary of, like, will this be a good partnership if someone's like, I don't know what you're going to tell me. I know what to do. And I'm like, I'm probably not going to tell you anything
Ooh.
you can't Google necessarily, but also it's probably the application part. Because that's something, and hopefully listeners aren't tired of me asking people this, but like I've always find it an interesting dynamic of how do I get someone to move past the phrase of like, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. I just need to do it. And that's where they leave themselves. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes there's other things that we can do to kind of get past that roadblock. Is there anything that comes to mind to help people move into kind of at least a mindset that feels more empowered instead of like, well, I'm just not doing it. I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is the motivation languages, that I talk about within the personality types. And so, as a coach, it becomes important to start to recognize the right questions to ask. So again, right, that nice way when I'm trying to get them to recognize it's time to make a change, what I'm focusing in for them is, who does this serve, right? This change is not just impacting you, but this is who else it's going to impact. And so we're thinking about the who component of that change. If we're looking at the right ways, we're looking at the data, we're looking at the history and the facts. And so we're looking at the why of that change being important. The my ways were really focused on action. And so it's like, I'm going to tell you what to do and you can do it or not, but then we're going to see what the outcome is if you followed the instructions and you checked the box or not. Like, and for them it's going to be really a like, give me 4 weeks that you follow my parameters and let's see if the needle moves, right? And then fun ways are an interesting one for me, because that adventure component means that we need to give them enough space to sort of play in the area. So we're asking them to think about how they want to accomplish the goal. So we're giving them the end target, but we got to give them space to figure out the steps along the way, which again is very different than that right way component of like, give me the steps, give me the rules, and I'll follow them, and then hopefully it works. And so, we really start to look at how am I communicating with these different people.
Absolutely. When it comes to those fun ways, are they still someone that could like follow some sort of a structure? Is that where you have to get creative of like, how do we track like what you're doing? I feel like those are like, they're not the person that's going to want to track their food necessarily and like weigh everything. It doesn't sound like. Is there ways to like
Mm-mm.
give them some structure? Is it really like, hey, this is where we're focusing on the end result and like, look how fun that's going to be?
So
Is the main like motivation.
jazz hands.
Jazz hands, look at
Right.
this. Look at where we're going. Very excitement.
Oh, no, well, it's absolutely a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge because this is the group that you're like, no, I really need you to stay in the bumper guards. So for me, if I was trying to navigate lifestyle and nutrition changes with this particular group, I would be saying, all right, here's kind of the five rules for the week. Tell me how you can fit within them, right? Tell me which one feels really like yucky to you, and let's see if we can zhuzh that and find a way to have a little adventure in it, right? Like maybe it's because I know you're big on like, are you drinking your water, right? Let's start there. The bar's low, and so for them, maybe it's a I want you to go find like five flavors that you are going to test out this week for like, do you like the lemon, the lime, the orange, or the mint the best,
Yeah.
right? And which one makes the water more exciting for you? And it sounds
Little
so
adventures,
silly.
plot. Yeah, but it sounds automatically more interesting of like, let's
I don't
make this an
know.
adventure.
I
Yeah.
don't know which
Let's
one
find
I like
out.
the best.
I love this. I love this. This is because I find questions so interesting because I don't feel like at least my style, right? I mean, this happens with a lot of like male coaches potentially of like they just kind of like this is how we do it. This is da 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 da. These are the rules, do this. If you don't like that's just an excuse blah 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 versus like usually just ask a lot of questions of like what happened? Why didn't it work? I'm not going to beat you over the head with a stick. Like that's not effective. It's usually yeah, talking or figuring some stuff out is I find more effective, but um how what are some things to keep in mind if someone because I thought this for a long time of like which honestly probably made me hesitate doing any kind of retreats with you sooner because I'm like I'm just a company of one. I don't really lead people, but then one I eventually figured out I lead my clients, local community stuff, but also everything was so applicable to like how do we lead ourselves to
Hmm.
a different because you might have a manager at work that's trying to like mold you and create some change and develop you as a leader, but also we like I feel like we need to learn how to lead ourselves to get to the goals that we want. What comes to mind for people trying to kind of do this internally to lead themselves to a better situation?
Well, so first and foremost, like my philosophy on leadership has never been, how much formal leadership capacity do I have? It's always been, do I want impact and influence in my life? And that applies to how I run myself, my small business. It applies to how I interact with my family. Every time I get back into this content, I'm like, oh, I forgot again, right? And I wrote it. So it takes a really long time to have all of this be really integrated into the way you operate on a daily basis. Um, I have a my way kid. I have two my way kids actually. And there's some major challenges with that as a my way because I'm like, we can't all be right. And only one of us is going to make it out of here if we don't do my way, right? And they're like, your way's dumb. It's not my way, so we're not doing that. Um, so it's always been about more impact and more influence, and good leadership starts with self leadership, and enough self awareness to set your ego down and to recognize when you're sort of operating in that near overwhelm space. It's really catastrophic to be operating from a space of ego in your leadership, whether that's just how you're showing up in the community. Right ways become hyper micromanagers when they are operating in an ego space. My ways, total bulldozers. Fun ways start to seem really chaotic and disorganized and um, tend to not make a lot of decisions. And it feels really like fluid. And nice ways can become really codependent in an ego space because they're just going to kind of defer to the loudest voice. And none of that is effective in our own leadership practice, right? Whether it's with our family, our small business, our customers, our teams, whether it's a team of 5 or 8,000, none of that's going to serve you well long term. So it's really important that you are at least stopping and going, what approach am I taking to the interactions I'm having? Again, personally, professionally, one on one, large groups. Is there a need for me to shift? Because that's the only thing that I control. And the things I'm holding on to, is it serving me? Is it working? Am I getting the results that I want? Because if I'm not getting the results that I want, then the actions have to change. If we want sustainable change in action, we have to get deeper into those experiences and beliefs to get people to change their actions long term, leading to long term results differences.
Really interesting. One of the could I guess before you go or ask that other question, can you explain that kind of? I think we had a visual, but like, is it higher self, ego, and then is it overwhelm below that? Just that scale. So when we talk about like, oh, you're operating at ego, what that might
Yeah.
mean for someone.
Yeah. So I've started talking about the idea of my capacity, my emotional bandwidth in terms of an elevator, right? And so all of us have these different versions of self, and basement brain is like total survival mode. It's like fight, flight, or freeze. We're not going to make it out of here today. That's when like we really can't problem solve and think innovatively. And then overwhelm self, that's really just one or two steps above basement brain. Like I'm starting to recognize that I'm going to fall apart, or I'm not recognizing, but everybody around me is starting to go steer clear. And then ego self is an interesting one for me, and people don't like to think about their own ego in terms of like maybe I'm not responding very responsibly. Um, if you've ever been around teenagers live in the ego zone, right? Where they're very egocentric and don't have a lot of others awareness. They don't have a lot of empathy for others. That overwhelmed self, and we've all been here, is a little bit like an adult acting like a toddler. Right? You gave me the wrong color sippy cup, and now I'm going to lose my mind. Crisis, crisis.
Curious.
And so overwhelm is like adults acting like toddlers. You've met them before. Ego self is full grown adults acting or behaving very egocentrically. Me. And then penthouse brain is our best self, right? It's our best version of ourselves. And as we have more experiences in our lives, more distance happens between who is my ego self and who is my best self, which is pretty cool because that means a little hiccup in life. Okay, maybe my elevator drops a few floors, but I don't crash and burn back into overwhelm, right? It takes something bigger for me to drop back into that ego space or a lot of little things. But I know a lot of people that post COVID and post all of the stuff we're barely surviving above that ego zone, right? And so when the scale doesn't move, when somebody gives me instructions that I don't like or agree with, or they take my fish food away, the ice cream, not actual fish
Oh
food.
yes.
Um, it feels bigger. than it
Hmm.
would if I wasn't so fatigued or worn out or had so many life changes in a short period of time. And so then we sort of operate a little closer and closer to that ego self. And so I've been teaching people for years now to start thinking about that in terms of distance from I'm falling apart at the seams. What that does for me as a leader is I can really quickly go, oh, their ego self has nothing to do with me, right? Their ego response has nothing to do with me. Even if I poked the ego, even if I poked the core values, I can shift how I show up, but it doesn't make me less of a person. It doesn't make me less human. It doesn't make me less, right? And so I can really quickly go, oh, this isn't about me, and I can set down my own ego because ego to ego, it's
Yeah, trouble.
it's catastrophic really, really fast. Um, that ego to ego behavior is what we would start talking about, the term collusion that comes from
Mhm.
the Arbinger Institute's outward mindset, where we just, your bad behavior justifies my bad behavior, justifies your bad behavior. And then we just get in this like loop of bad egocentric
Yeah.
behavior. And so the other part for me as a leader that becomes really important when I start thinking about it in bandwidth is if I know I'm closer, I've been worn out, some bad stuff happened, too many surprises, I'm just feeling overwhelmed right now. If I'm operating in those low zones, I also know that's not the time in my life to make big decisions, take on new projects, buy a business, uh, sell my house. Like, if I'm operating in those lower spaces, like that is a time to stabilize, and not grab onto new things that feel like if I do this, it'll work, it'll fix it. And I think that's really important for us as individuals to realize is, am I making changes or choices because I'm trying to regain control or like soothe my ego versus is it serving my long-term goals?
So one of the things you've talked about with when we were talking about the ego is safety, right? If safety doesn't, if you don't feel safe, and then all of a sudden, like we're going to add a bunch of things onto your list, you're like, I'm just trying to survive here, and then now you're telling me to go exercise 5 times a week. I'm like, that seems completely
Ridiculous.
not, yeah, not gonna work. Not a great thing. And I hear that a lot of like, oh, it's just not a great time. And I think sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's an excuse potentially. But I think it's also, I do see those people and I think they tend to be kind of high performers of like they're dealing with a lot, maybe some grief, some loss, and that's given me a great visual in my head too of like they're really, yeah, still pretty dangerously close to that survival zone or just above ego. And I think sometimes that's where I see like health, working on your health can be helpful because it feels like you build more resilience. I know my husband's dealt with that of like he has, if his health is not great, like it's harder to be great at business, right? Versus if he takes
Yeah.
a little bit step back before he absolutely like crashes, build up some health reserves, then you can kind of push business a little bit. But it definitely feels like a very fine balance, and like creating that level of awareness just takes so much time of like, oops, too much, or oops, not enough. But that's a great visual with that.
Yeah, well, and I will say the closer people are in those lower, what I call them floors, right? Like I literally talk about
Hmm.
like an elevator and the floors, first, second, third floor, all the way to the ego, all the way to penthouse. If we're in those lower, the closer we are to basement brain, the smaller the goal setting should be. So maybe we start
Interesting.
with 1 day of walking instead of five. Like,
Hmm.
and then saying, well, how did that feel? Right? Like, how did you feel after? And did you feel like you missed anything for the day? Do you feel like anything fell apart that day that you took that time
Hmm.
out? Let's talk smaller goals. And so the closer we are to the basement, the shorter and more attainable those goals should be. Um, and so again, if I'm recognizing somebody's an ego or right above ego, I'm not looking at let's plan 2 years. I'm like, let's plan 1 week, right?
Yeah.
In organizational settings, in business settings. If leaders that are reporting to me are like overwhelmed because they don't understand the big mission of the organization, I'm not going, well, obviously 10 years from now, this is how this looks. And I'm asking them to really zero in and say, what part of our organizational goals do you think you own? And then how do you set goals specific to that chapter, right? And keep them small, keep them attainable, because those wins are actually what builds the resilience. That the winning, otherwise we just compound the failure feeling,
was gonna say one of
right?
my questions that came to mind is because people talk a lot about like self-sabotage, right? They'll do well and they're like, "Oh, I did well. I should reward myself," and they just can't seem to break out of that cycle. Is that when they're too close to that, or what is that kind of maybe typically about when they're in that kind of self-sabotaging cycle?
So emotional intelligence is an interesting one on this one. And I do talk about this like window of capacity. It's a little bit different than the elevator, but most of us have beliefs, right? And so when I talked about personality experiences as the second ring, the beliefs ring is the third ring that I talk about in changed behavior. Beliefs is an interesting one because we as humans are deeply programmed for self-preservation, right? Like none of us walk around going, huh, that's cool. I might die today, right? We really are like, how do I survive this? Everything. But this window of belief that I talk about and I teach in some spaces is interesting to think about because the reality is if I walk around and I say, well, I believe I'm designed to be a I'm big boned, right? Like let's say that's my belief. I'm big boned. Well, if I start to operate outside that belief and get thin and don't look big boned anymore, and that changes, then all of a sudden I start to go, well, now my physical being does not align to my own belief system. And that's
I've
where
heard about that. Yeah.
self-sabotage starts to happen. Right? That's where we start to go, oh wow, look at me. I'm not who I believe I am. So I have two choices. I either shift my beliefs and create a new window of belief system, or
Mhm.
I get back within my window that previously exists. And I talk about this in my college classrooms with my early students a lot. If you walk around and you say, well, I'm a B student, and your first test, you get a D, you will kick up your work. And you will go, now I have to work harder because my belief is that I'm a B student. But if I get an A, I don't immediately go, oh man, maybe I'm an A student. I go, oh, I don't have to work that hard. And I'll bring it back down into that B level because that's my deep held belief of who I am. I will bring
So
it back
interesting.
down. And so we do the same with our weight. We do the same with um, really much of what we navigate in our real life. I struggle, not I struggle with, as an example, let's say
Mhm.
I think that I'm just not really good at relationships, right?
Mm.
And a relationship's going super well. Well, that doesn't align to my belief system. So I'm going to drop a bomb in it
Yeah, I'm gonna
so
set it
that
on
I can
fire.
be right.
Yeah.
Because we are deeply programmed
Mhm.
for self-preservation. And part of self-preservation is living in the beliefs of who we believe we are.
Mhm. That resonates so much because even on the small scale, people are like, "Well, I lost some weight, so I can eat more this week," and it's like, "Wait, our system was working." Or
So
they'll start
keep
to,
doing
well, I
it.
don't want to, yeah, it's like, but I don't want to get too skinny, or I don't want to look too muscular, and as if all of these things like happen at the drop of a hat. I'm like, there'll be warning signs, like this is not super fast process. So like,
Yeah.
but that's super interesting. Is there a way that we can start to like cultivate new beliefs? Like if we do want to change like who we want to be, of like how do you like start that process if you really do want to
Uh,
change?
I mean, I think the first thing is to understand what they believe about themselves, right?
Hmm.
Like having so for me, I would have conversations with students or leaders. Well, what kind of leader do you think you are, right? What kind of leader do
Hmm.
you want to be? And really understanding and trying to understand their own self-image is going to allow for more meaningful conversations in the direction of where you want to go. So if you're navigating nutrition and body image and stuff like that, the first, like, it's really going to be important to understand who they have been most of their life, what they believe about how they got there, and which parts they own of that. And what is going to be important for them in terms of why they are considering changing, right? Um, and revisiting those conversations routinely. A lot of that though is also going to come down to some possible therapy. If it's really deeply held and that sabotage is nonstop, there's got to be some picking apart of those belief systems, and some of us are not qualified for that, right? Like, I'm by no means in therapeutic counseling. Organizational psychology does not make me a licensed counselor. I have to say that in retreats and workshops. Like, ah, wrong doctor.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. That
that's
comes up a lot.
important. It does,
Uh,
right? And you're like,
yeah.
whoa, too much information.
Yeah, well, and especially that visual of the elevator has been really helpful too, because I'm like, you are so close to that ego zone, or things are not great. And like, just the resilience is not there, right? I don't know, like a bird poops on them and they're like, the day is ruined. And it's like, whoa, that was a really small thing. Like, we're not going to be very resilient to any changes or adversity when like we're trying these new
Yeah.
things. Because that adversity and like those speed bumps are guaranteed when you're trying to change your behavior. And
Hmm.
that's quite often when I'm like, I think maybe counseling would be the best option here first. So you have a little bit less stress, or a little less overload. So you have some extra resources or budget, so to speak, energy
Hmm.
budget to work on this stuff. So that's been a really helpful visual. And for that person who says it's not a good time, it's like, maybe it's not a good time, but maybe it's for this stuff, but maybe it's a good time for therapy. That can be more of a um, you know, beneficial tool to actually reduce some stress, instead of me adding more stress by
Yeah.
saying like, go buy more
Hi.
vegetables.
Yeah, well, and I often think about that ego zone, and that teenager egocentric kind of responsiveness. Um, what you will see from anyone in the ego zone is a lot of deflecting, right? If you've spent
Mhm.
any time around teenagers, you will hear really quickly, well, that wasn't my fault. Like, that happened because that guy did that, or this teacher did that, or this person did that. That's not my fault, right? It's not my fault that I shoveled a whole container of fish food in my mouth. I had a hard day.
Exactly. Wait a second.
Could have just taken 3 bites. I'm just saying. And so that deflective behavior is really indicative of the ego zone. One of the things that over the years I've been running women's retreats, there's one that's really, really interesting, a pattern that has emerged that I have found really, really interesting, is women specifically struggle to recognize the difference between lazy and rest,
Yes. Yes, agreed.
right?
Because I feel like everyone's like, what can I do? Or I should be doing something, or
Right.
yeah.
And so, like, one of the messaging that I do in some of the bigger retreats is like, sometimes we're just in a season of rest and stability. And if you're feeling any guilt about that, A, that's an ego response. And B, we're not going to get anywhere until we can get over that hurdle, right? You have to allow rest, and rest without guilt. And rest might be a year. Like, it might be a year after a really, and it doesn't mean we lay in bed for a year, but it means that we find other ways to A, set that guilt aside, and B, find ourself again, right? I can't do a lot if I can't even read a book without guilt, right?
Especially, I mean, from
If
my
I can't,
perspective, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, if I can't go on a walk without feeling guilty about not doing the dishes,
Hmm.
right? Like, if I'm like, well, going on a walk means I'm being lazy at home. Like,
Right.
there's no getting over that hurdle until that difference between rest and lazy, or lack of productivity and lazy, is sort of abolished.
So, because one of the questions that came to mind is like, how do we use this? Two things, I guess. How do we use this in a family setting? Of like, how do you lead your family to a healthier place? And I find that's definitely, and again, sometimes out of my scope. I feel like because I don't have kids, I'm not like a family counselor, but also with the lens of like, let's change about maybe how we talk about food. One, so your kids have a better relationship with themselves and about food. And so you're not paying for their nutritionist in 20 to 30 years because they were taught to eat in a certain way, or this is bad, this is good type of thing, trying to make it as neutral as possible so they can still have their their own influence over it. But family setting, and then I think I actually forgot my second part of that question, but how can we use these tools in that family setting to help move everybody to a healthier place?
Well, again, I think this is part of what I have, like one of those patterns that's emerged with women over the years, and why I think women struggle to find the space and time for so much of the stuff that they should be doing,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
It's often very closely related to how much stuff we just keep piling on our own plate, and not learning to go, oh, actually, that doesn't have to be mine. And I'll give you an example, Allie, because I have been the victim of my own efficiencies in many instances of my life. And years ago, I was operating in overwhelm ego zone just probably for months on end. And part of that being very task oriented as a dominant my way, I was like, well, I'll just handle it because it's taking more work to let anybody else handle it. So I'll just take that and I'll take that and I'll take that. And I talk about meatballs on spaghetti a lot here, is like I just kept adding meatballs to my spaghetti, and then things start falling off of the plate. And
Mm.
if you're not taking stuff off your plate, then you don't choose what falls off your plate. But I was really in a space of like egotistical overwhelm. If I don't handle it, somebody else is going to break it. And I had big feelings one night, and my husband was like, "Why are you rage cooking?"
Rage
And I
cooking.
was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "You're literally like slamming things around." And I was like, "It's because I hate cooking and I have to cook and everybody's making me do the cooking." And he was like, "Who's making you do the cooking?" And I was like, "Society." And he was like, "Okay, well, Christine, I never told you you had to do that. If you don't want to
Yeah.
cook, I'll cook. But you have to stop cooking." And I was like, "You don't know me, right?" And it was the most awkward 4 weeks of our lives because he kept like looking around the corner. So if anybody that's been in my house knows, like I don't have a big open floor plan, and so I'd be in the living room trying to read a book, minding my own business because like they were clearly doing it wrong. Um,
Obviously. Yeah.
and he'd look around the corner and he'd be like, "Are you really gonna let me do this?" And I was like, "I'm fine. Do what you want." And it was like 4 weeks. It was like 4 weeks of me actively like rooting myself out of the kitchen because he was like, "I'm not going to do it if you're going to micromanage it." And I was like, "Well, that's fair, but also stupid. And also
Yes.
you're not doing it the way I would do it." And he's like, "Right. But if you
Mm-hmm.
want me to do it, you have to let me do it."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
This
And,
is so,
and it was
it's so
a really awkward 4 weeks because he literally would be looking around the corner going, "I'm starting. I'm going to use this pan." And on the inside, I'd be like, "Oh, that's not the pan I would use." Really? 6 pans? You need 6 pans for that meal? That feels like a lot. But he was like, "Why do you
yes.
care? You're not in here. You're not cooking. Why do you care?" "Well, because it's making it harder." "For who?" "Not you, because you're not doing it." "Yeah, but my way would be better." Right? And so, like, eye twitching and like, I literally had to learn to leave the room. But I see women do this all the time with the
Yeah.
kids, with the cooking, with the dishes, with the calendar management. And there's all kinds of research out there right now of the emotional labor women are doing in the households. We are doing that. But is it because you have to, and the world
Mhm.
will literally end if you don't? Or is it because you don't trust anybody else to help you?
Are there questions, or do you have questions around that to help women realize? Because I see that too, and I've had a great business coach say that before. Of like, she's like, you said you need more time for your business, and you said you're doing this task that someone else can be doing, and it was at the time it's kind of always the case, but like taking care of my horses, someone else could do that. I'm like, oh no, but I have a horse that will eat people, like that. I can't possibly find someone. It's very true, but she's old and grumpy. But I was like, I can't possibly find someone to help with that. She's like, but you have to. And it felt truly impossible. Is it just like kind of forcing those hard questions of like, but is it necessary? Like, will we all die if you don't do this thing? Like, how do we get someone out of that fixed spot? Because I've definitely been there and thought things were impossible, though. in
Yeah,
fact, we're not.
we'll all die. We'll all
Yeah.
die if I stop cooking. Well, we did go hungry and had some weird meals for a couple of days, right? Um, I think that there is a necessity to practice curiosity if you're on the coaching end of it. Um, I also think that there's a necessity to like have people recognize that they are or aren't willing to make the modifications. And so, sometimes it's a matter of saying, do you trust me enough to let me ask hard questions? Because if you don't, we can't get anywhere. But if you do, and you're willing to like explore some solutions, I think we can come up with something that makes sense. But you're going to have to be uncomfortable for a little while. But that discomfort is in direct conflict with our deep need for safety, right? The beginning of discomfort is the starting place of this feels like an emergency.
That resonates a lot because I do. And I think I've thought of this right after I think the first day of your retreat when you asked us when's the last time you felt defensive, and I was like, oh God, all of this week
Right
when like,
now?
yeah, now I feel defensive. Now I don't want to talk about this. I was like, oh, coming in all open to like talk about things. I'm like, oh nope, not that. Don't really want to talk about that. But it was it was funny because I didn't know how to like put. I was like, what am I feeling? I don't know what emotion is tied to this, and it definitely took some figuring out of what is this? Why am I so uncomfortable? And one of the questions I had was talking about boundaries because I see a lot of clients like, oh, people. So it's kind of the reverse of like, one, we got to break down the boundaries that we set for ourselves, right? Of like, I have to cook, I have to do this task, but also like in the reverse side of like, I guess it's reallocating our boundaries in that sense of like, but I need a boundary here to help me, you know, be successful in my health journey when people like peer pressure or this comes up. What comes to mind on the flip side of that when we are putting up good or new boundaries to help us succeed in this new
Well,
endeavor?
well, again, I think that a lot of it's going to come down to let's start small,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
who is in your life that is supportive of these changes? A lot of times change requires that we root out some of the yucky stuff. And sometimes that's relationships. Sometimes that's other people in our lives. But maybe don't start with that one because that's gonna be
Just cut them
uncomfortable.
out.
Just
Just cut
you're
them
all
out.
out. We're done. And so I think it really is important to start small and have, those conversations where people have an opportunity to think about a variety of solutions, like a variety of possibilities. Um, but trying not to like tackle the whole world in a day, right? And I've loved your 5 things model. I believe it was 5 points for the day that you really started helping people like navigate, because it
Hmm.
is something that can be tackled, but it also like, if that feels too much, could we do 3? Like, could we start with 3? Could we get smaller? But the boundaries is really challenging because again, a lot of times it's about what I am not willing to give up. Right. And so that inner boundary of like, I have to own all of this or the world will end. And that takes some practice. That takes some like, well, let's try it. But again, now if we go back to the personality types, there's 2 personalities that don't love the saying, let's try it. Right? Like, let's try
Yeah.
something. They don't love that.
Yeah.
And that's the right way and nice way because they really like clarity. Hi, it's me.
Hi, it's me. I'm the right way.
They like the clarity and the safety. And so try something doesn't feel clear or safe. My
Hmm.
way, on the other hand, loves to try something, but they sort of have to come to that conclusion themselves. And so you sort of act more like a you're a coach to navigate the maze in that scenario. Funway loves to try something, but getting them to stick with it is a whole nother ball game. So um the setting the boundaries is going to be really challenging if the boundary is actually a self-inflicted issue. And I've asked women specifically a lot, like, who made that a rule? Who put that deadline in place for you? Who
Yeah.
told you that was a requirement? Oh, well, it just is. Oh, so you
Yeah.
did. Well, if it's self-imposed, you get to move the target.
Hmm. That's so interesting. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was goal setting because I feel like goal setting is so interesting to me. it's great. But also I think sometimes it's not an excuse, but I think sometimes we almost like idolize the future possibilities because they seem pretty infinite versus like what's actually going to get us to like take a different action. And all of this I feel like resonates with that. But what advice do you have for people to make goal setting more effective or more effective strategies around it?
So for me, it comes down to identifying those core values. And when I talk about core values with goal setting, I like for people to look at 5 different values that through their lifetime, whether they realize it or not, they probably have identified with 1 or 2 of them. And then when we start doing goal setting, what we really need to do is, does that serve that value? Right? Because
Mm.
otherwise we are in infinite possibilities. And then without realizing it, we're sort of like, we're like zeroed in on like there's a lifestyle goal and there's a legacy goal and there's a cash flow goal and there's an impact goal. But if you start to really break it down, lifestyle and legacy goal setting looks really different. Legacy goal setting looks really different than like cash flow goal setting. And so you have to really know what your decision making values are focused on. And I shared that chart with you in the past. And so outside of personality and generation and religion, culture, race, gender values that you've identified with, you need to understand what your future decision making values really are targeted to, because otherwise you're going to be like lifestyle one day, legacy the next, cash flow the next, and without even realizing it, every time you're starting a goal, you're undoing another one. So you've got to get laser focused on what is my future self want out of life. And if we can zero in on that goal, like then we can even talk about nutrition in terms of those goals. Like you're going to have a really hard time with your lifestyle goals if you can't fit in a plain seat.
Absolutely. I mean, that when you're painting that picture, I instantly like feel that level of frustration when I am chasing one thing over another thing. And I think it can definitely probably get swayed with who you're surrounded by. If like
Mhm.
we're surrounded by a lot of business owners and people, and you can definitely, I feel like, get caught up in like the cash flow goals, the legacy goals, the impact goals, which is all great. But like when you during that training or I think it was a luncheon, shared those things, I was like instantly lasered focused on like, oh, lifestyle is so important to me. And I think we had that joke of like, you can't pay me enough money to be at a certain place at a certain time, like telling me where
No,
I would.
not
You
doing
were like
that.
instantly, yeah, you're like $1 million is exactly how much you would have to pay me to get me to do something at a time I don't want to do. And which was so freeing in that sense of like these things are way more important to me than, a cash flow or legacy. I'm like, my kids can get that, my grandkids can
They
get
can
their own
build their
job.
own
Like I'm
lives.
yeah,
That's not
not
my
worried about
job.
that. Yeah, not my job, not my job. Do you have any questions around that to help somebody clarify their goals or what is most important to them? Or does it just tend to like resonate with you once you kind of see those categories
I
lined
think
up?
once you see the categories, it's a little bit easier to go, oh, that one is more important, right? And I tell people to rank them
Mm.
and then absolutely cross off the bottom 2 or 3, right? Like, and that becomes really important. And I know that that's been a huge impact on my marriage, my husband and I's life, and the goals that we have set, because a lot of other business owners are like, oh, I'm trying to build generational wealth for like everybody and have something to hand to my kids. Okay, well, that's a really different decision making set than what we're doing with like, we want to travel and be present, and so that lifestyle is a really just a different decision making factors. And so I would say, if you want to share out to your community, I'm happy to share that handout that outlines the decision making values, as well as this personality handout that I've showed to the group a couple of times already.
Yes.
And then you can just share it with people, and it may or may not resonate, but if you at least know which of those decision making values, that's going to help with meaningful goal setting, right? Both because you'll be able to look at it from a lens of, does this serve legacy? Does this serve lifestyle? Does this serve impact in my community? Or am I just saying yes to everything? Well, no wonder your calendar's so full. No wonder you're so tired, right? You're doing all the things because you're acting like a squirrel.
Great visual. Again, yeah. My dogs have
And then
been
you're
chasing a lot of squirrels, and so that's a good visual of like, oh yeah, I don't want to be a squirrel. I don't want to have to pivot, and that's a stressful life. That's a very
it does,
stressful
it seems
life.
exhausting if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, in that in itself, it seems really clarifying and almost to like take stuff off people's plate. Because if legacy is truly really important to you, you're probably going to have to make more sacrifices as far as like your time. You're working 60-hour, 80 weeks. Like you're just working a lot. And that's okay because that's what you want. But know that like your lifestyle or health goals are probably going to suffer a little bit, or we need to be okay with not optimizing absolutely everything. Because like your time for that is finite. You care more
Hmm.
about this, and that's fine. I think a lot of people think that when they first start working with me, like, oh, she's going to have me doing like sauna and cold plunge and all this supplement routine and all this stuff. I'm like, if you don't care that much, and I've definitely had people say that, of like, Allie, I think I'm as healthy as I care to be. Like, I don't care about more. And I'm like, fine with me. Like, I'm going to educate on points of like, I think you should probably continue to work on your vegetable intake because colorectal cancer sucks. But if you don't want to eat more vegetables, if you don't want to take the time to add that habit, like, it's your life. But at least people know like where that fits in versus like, yeah, like maybe I should really let certain aspects go as goals because like they really don't feed my soul versus if I were to focus on impact and focus on lifestyle, like those really make me a lot happier.
Yeah, and it's just there's so much information coming at us all the time that it's so easy to get distracted. And again, if you're not laser focused on, that end piece and who you want to be as like the end goal, and it might change over time. Like it can change when you have kids. It can change when you decide to start the business, but you should be able to be really clear on when and how I say yes to things and when and how I say no.
Mhm.
But if we don't have those in mind, if we're not clear on those values, the chances are we're saying yes to a lot of stuff. And that is meatballs just piling up and piling up and piling up on our spaghetti. And then all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh my God," right? And meatballs are rolling all over the place. Your meatballs are out of control, people, and you just don't even know what to do with yourself. And the good ones are falling off, right? The stuff that was important is falling off because you can't say no to the other stuff.
Absolutely. Again, such a great visual of like you don't get to choose. Like you're not gonna get to choose like what thing you forgot on your calendar because you're so overwhelmed or like you forgot to get up in time. You're just gonna miss it. You're gonna miss it, and then you're gonna figure out later that oh, that was a sacrifice I really didn't want to actually make.
Yeah.
Okay, to kind of summarize, where can we send people to get this kind of started as far as like figuring out what values are most important to them? Where should that journey start for them? Where can we point them?
Well, we have a resources page on our website where the personality assessment is available for free. And we've just launched a new core values assessment as well. And so on the resources page, those both exist. And so my website is www.evolvingleaderfellowship.com. Lots and lots of really incredible resources there. Retreats happen throughout the year in different settings. Those are some great spaces to take the time to dig into some of this stuff with a community. So there's a ton there. There is workbooks on Amazon. The Ways to Lead Personality Uncourse is available on Amazon. So there's a lot of resources that are pretty easily accessible right now. And I'm always available on the social medias if people have questions or concerns. So you can find me on the Evolving Leader or the Evolving Leader Fellowship. I think there's TikTok channels out there for both me and my business partner. So they're all there, but you can click to most of them via the website.
So, yeah, I'll make sure I get all of that linked below so people can find all of the resources. A couple closing questions. What advice would you have for someone who is just getting started or potentially restarted? Usually that's a health journey, but really any journey to change their behavior to end up in a different situation. What advice would you have for them?
There's more time than you think there is. So be patient with yourself and with the journey. I get it. I get it. Like I want everything done yesterday. But there's more time than you believe there is, especially for young adults, right? So many young adults are like, I've got to get all this done by the time I'm 25. And I'm like, bro, Your 40s is where it's at. Like,
Yeah,
it's going to be a cool journey getting there. And don't forget to be on the journey.
amazing. And then the last question, in a culture that makes being unhealthy very normal, very common, what would you like to see normalized to help our whole population at that high population level get healthier, whether that's physically, mentally, holistically?
Well, I think that I would really hope to help people resonate with the idea that rest is not lazy. And,
Mhm.
we have to learn to set resting guilt aside. I mean, there's so many comedians out there that talk about it too, right? Like, my husband comes in and I jump off the chair, like, if he catches me
Yes.
sitting, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're allowed to sit, people.
Yeah.
um, Rest is not lazy, and none of the rest of our body works if
Mhm.
we're completely exhausted. And so, set down the shitty shoulds and
Mm.
figure out what that long-term impact is and who you are designed to be, and what it looks like for you to rest and grow and change over time to be more you, right? To be a better, bigger version of you, not bigger in size, hopefully. Since this is a nutrition podcast, it's
All
fine.
good. All good. We get it. Yeah.
Um, you know, there's more time than you think there is.
Mhm. Is there, just made me think of something else, but is it true that some people rest in different ways? But I do hear this from women of like, oh, I rest by doing the laundry. Like that's my me time, thinking time, which is a terrible example. I hate folding laundry, but I feel like
I
people
was
will
like,
say
does
that.
she
And
want to
I,
come over?
yeah, I know. I have some to fold.
I
But I think I think I've also said this too of like using our property or farm as an excuse of like, oh, mowing the lawn really like quiets my mind or whichever, but it's still work. I think I twist that in my brain of like it's rest when a nap honestly might be a better option. But I tell myself like it's rest. It's how I rest. It's how I recharge.
So one of the things I posted a couple of years ago was around New Year's resolutions, right? I posted something on my own page about New Year's resolutions and how we always are posting these like things that within 3 weeks we're giving away. And so wouldn't it be cool if some of our resolutions were around, I'm gonna nap once a week without feeling bad about it, or or as an adult woman, I'm gonna find a new hobby, right? Like I'm gonna try some new stuff and see if I can find something that I love. Because I think many of us in our adultdom are struggling to even know what we love to do. Right. And so yeah, then you default to, well, I like mowing the lawn. I also like
Yeah.
mowing the lawn, but if I really dig into why, it's because it's the only time my children can't demand food of me. It's the only time I can't hear them. I'm like, right?
Can't
I
hear.
can't hear
Yep.
you. So it's really less about the mowing and more about I get left alone for a little bit, right?
Mhm.
I mean, your
Yeah.
teenagers, you don't have teenagers yet, but teenagers full on avoid coming out of their rooms because they don't want their parents to see them not doing things.
Mm.
So, like, right, how often are we finding things that feel like accomplishing something when what we really need is a nap?
Yeah. That resonates a lot. Probably nap once a
I don't mean
quarter.
to be in your head, but
No, it's all good. I just love this. It's like, yeah, it's all great, like food for thought. Of like, do I do that? Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. I could other little like micro areas, right, that I never would put on a goal sheet. Like napping would never be, but that's also probably because I would say like, well, I nap too long, so I shouldn't nap. And it's like reality is I should probably nap more often, so I don't take a 5 hour nap. I was probably a little too exhausted there, but
yeah.
areas of growth.
Also, mind your business.
Yeah.
I
Oh my
had
gosh.
stuff to do that day.
Yep, not anymore. Not gonna get done.
Yeah,
All good.
yeah.
Awesome, Dr. K. Well, I will link everything in the show notes to make sure people can find you. I've really benefited so much from your uncourses, your books, your mini retreats, the stuff you do in the community with Salem Emerging Leaders, the chamber, everything. And I've enjoyed absolutely everything that I've been able to attend and consume. And I find it so relevant. So even if people are thinking, I'm not a leader, I don't, lead a bunch of people, you lead yourself. And I've found everything that I've learned from you incredibly applicable in so many different areas of life. So, and it's interesting to learn as an adult for when you're not forced to learn anything. I just learn those things kind of passively, but it's just so interesting because I can instantly apply it versus being kind of force-fed to learn something is different as a kid. So that's been fun to learn, I feel like, how to be an adult or how to just be a better human from these principles.
Well, I'm glad that you've taken things away from it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for being here, and hopefully we'll chat soon. All right. Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end of the episode. A couple reminders before you go. If you found this episode helpful, please share with a friend. Please share on your social media. If you are watching on YouTube, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow on whatever platform you're listening to this. Leave a comment, leave a review. Anything and everything you can do to support the show is greatly, greatly appreciated. I just want to get this information out to the masses so we can impact more people. Lastly, if you want more free information, sign up for the Free Shit Friday email list at parksidenutrition.com/subscribe, and you'll get free shit delivered to your email every single Friday. All right, that's all I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one.